We have dramatic developments in a story that's captivated the country, police calling it a devastating outcome for all involved.
Fugitive Marakopa father Tom Phillips has been shot dead by police.
The Marakopa father had been on the run in the bush with his 3 children, Jada, Maverick and Ember, for almost 4 years.
Police say they fired back when the man, Tom Phillips, shot an officer.
Kia ora, I'm Amanda Gillies, and today on The Detail, the Tom Phillips saga.
It's a case that's gripped the nation and the world. Local media say after a fight with the mother of his children in late 2021, Tom Phillips disappeared into the Waikato wilderness.
But this week, after nearly 4 years on the run, Tom Phillips, the Marakopa father who evaded police for so long, who raised his 3 kids rough in the bush, who allegedly committed crimes for survival, shot a police officer in the head and then was shot dead in front of his daughter. There will be multiple police investigations, but for now, Police Commissioner Richard Chambers says his officers did a magnificent job in challenging circumstances.
We knew that we were dealing with an armed, a dangerous and a very motivated individual in Mr. Phillips. And we had to be very, very cautious about the approach that we had taken. You know, that played out yesterday morning in a way that we suspected it could, which is not something that any of us wanted. But our assessment of the situation over the last 4 years has been spot on. And that was shown yesterday morning when we confronted Mr. Phillips. He shot one of my staff and we had to return fire. We have always been concerned that that may be exactly what occurred. And of course, that may also involve the children.
The Police Commissioner was backed up by the Police Minister and Prime Minister.
I think everyone could see just how difficult this situation was for police to deal with. It's almost the worst case scenario when you've got a father with 3 children deep in the bush with firearms, high-powered firearms, unpredictable and likely to use them. And in some ways, although it was an absolute tragedy, obviously recovering the children and having them now safely in Oranga Tamariki and extended family care is a good thing.
As I was being briefed, the officer who was shot was being operated on in Waikato Hospital. This is a constable who was out looking after his community, and what's happened is a reminder that police put themselves on the line every time, every day they put on that uniform to keep our community safe.
So who exactly is Tom Phillips? Why did he disappear into the bush? What led to this dramatic and tragic shootout? For those answers, today I talked to Stuff senior journalist Tony Wall, who has covered the story closely. He slept in the bush near where the Phillips family were found to be holed up. He's spoken to Tom's parents, and when we caught up, he was back in Marakopa. He found his way back in via a goat track. I started by asking him, how did this whole saga start 4 years ago?
Well, it all started when Tom's vehicle was found down on the beach near Marakopa, facing into the waves, no one in it, and everybody wondered what the hell was going on. The police were called, big searches and everything. There were fears the family had been swept away by a rogue wave or something like that. So it was a big mystery for about 2 weeks, and then suddenly Tom turned up with the kids at the family farm near Marakopa. So that was the sort of the initial thing that triggered things. And from there, he was charged with wasting police resources and was due to appear in court, I think, in January of the next year of 2022, and didn't appear, and he'd gone bush again with the kids, and that was getting on towards 4 years ago now.
And what is it? I'm assuming it's a custody issue. Is this why he's taken the kids bush?
Well, he might say so, but I would say now that who knows what's going on inside his head. It's pretty obvious that the guy's nuts, so I wouldn't even like to speculate, to be honest. Like all along it's been thought that, yeah, custody was driving this, but who knows? Who knows now after what's happened?
Now talk me through, how on earth, Tony, does a father and 3 kids remain hidden, missing, living in the bush for so long, undetected?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? There's always been speculated that he had people helping him, but now we're thinking maybe not. Maybe they were just living in the bush. It sounds as though they had multiple camps throughout the area in the bush, so it wasn't just one campsite, it was many. And he has building skills. Tom Phillips had building skills, so he may have built structures, just basic sort of structures, and the whole family would have sort of moved between these different sites. There was obviously the break-ins for supplies. So, breaking into stores and stuff to steal supplies that were needed. But it's still thought that at some point along the way they've had help.
And you just talked about the break-ins. There was a criminal element to what he did over the past 4 years for survival. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, there was a criminal element. He, allegedly robbed a bank in Tikuiti a couple of years back.
A woman who came face-to-face with a gun-toting bank robber, police say was Tom Phillips, says he told his female accomplice to use the gun.
The woman told Newshub today the accomplice was small and slight, but police say they don't know whether it was his 10-year-old daughter, Jada.
That was dramatic. There was cash blowing down the street as they were running off, and there was a shot fired. So I think that sort of made it clear to police that how serious it was, what they were dealing with. They were dealing with an armed guy who was pretty desperate and prepared to fire shots, and I actually did a story earlier this year looking into whether it was a child that was with him that had fired the shot. The supermarket manager that I spoke to who tackled Tom Phillips at the time said it was a child that pointed a gun at him. He turned and fled and heard heard a shot. So, the police at that stage realised, we're dealing with some pretty unstable people here and there's firearms involved.
Yeah, now before we get to how it all tragically ended, paint us a picture about who Tom is.
Yeah, so he's from a well-known and well-liked and well-respected Marakopa, Western Waikato farming family. Parents Neville and Julia have a large cattle and sheep farm about 10 k's back from the coast. I believe he grew up there. He went to a private school in Hamilton at one point, learned some survival skills. I think he did a 6-month course, maybe an outdoor course. Also has building skills. He left home quite young to go and work on a farm near Piopio, where he was a general hand and a shepherd, apparently very good at what he did, very reliable. And then at some point he's had 3 children to this woman, Kat, and then they've separated. And all this has played out. But he was always, like people have always said to me, he was a bit of a strange critter, a little bit different, a bit reclusive, but odd, but still, reasonably well liked.
And how have his family responded and reacted over the past 4 years? Because I know you have been in touch with him.
Well, I've been in touch with the parents, Neville and Julia, on and off. They've found it very intrusive, the media coverage, obviously, and haven't been keen to speak much. They've never really gone on camera or anything like that to do interviews, to call for him to come home. But they've always said, we're not helping him. The police have really shafted us. They feel that they've been hard done by the police. The media intrusion as well. Yeah, they just feel like it's all sort of coming down on them and they haven't been helping, and they're pretty adamant about that.
And what about Kat, the mother of the kids? How has she responded? What have we heard from her in the past?
She's kept a pretty low profile, and I think, deliberately so. She just wanted to sort of just let the police do their job and find her children. But I don't think she wanted to sort of exacerbate things by going public too much. She did one interview, I believe, with Mata Report for you guys.
I'm overwhelmed. I don't know, I'm like in survival mode every minute of every day. It's, you go to sleep at night and you wake up in the morning and everything, you forget for those first few moments in the morning, and then you remember. And it's like a waking nightmare every single day, and it just never stops. It's never ending. I just want them to come back. They need to be home. They don't belong out there.
She obviously felt, just distraught, hadn't seen her children for so long, and it was just, it must have been the most horrific experience.
What about these 3 kids? What do we know about them?
Well, they're now aged 12, Jada, 10, Maverick, and 9, Ember, I believe are the ages and name. And of course, 4 years younger than that when it all began, so very young. They'd been homeschooled by their father, Tom, and they were living in Aotearoa when they first went missing. So homeschooled by Tom. They look like bright and bubbly kids. All the photographs that you see of them, they're always smiling and looking really happy. But otherwise, not really a hell of a lot known about them.
What I find interesting, Tony, is they would have had opportunities when they came into town to leave their dad and go back into the community, but they obviously had a very tight bond with him and wanted to stay with him. Would that be fair?
That's the speculation. And again, a lot of this is speculation. We can only speculate. And we may never know. But I mean, it appears that we don't know of any attempts to leave their father or get out of the bush, but who knows? Maybe they did try, I don't know. But it's generally considered that he's pretty much brainwashed them into his way of thinking and convinced them that it's the best course of action, which is, pretty out there, pretty outrageous, really.
Now let's talk about what happened with the shooting. Talk us through that in the early hours of Monday morning.
Yes, so I actually got a call about 6 a.m. to say that it had gone down and that Tom Phillips was dead. And it appears that what's happened is they've come out of their bush encampment that they had on Tianga Road, which is not far from where I actually did a night in the bush for the Paddy Gower Has Issues show. We spent a night in the bush just to see what it was like, and it turns out we weren't far away from this camp where they actually were, and that they've left on him, and it looks like it's probably him and his eldest daughter Jada have left on a quad bike that's been stolen from somewhere and driven south on back roads to the town of Piu Piu, and that's about an hour. So it takes about an hour in the middle of the night and cold weather. That's not an easy trip. And then there's been a break-in at the PGG Wrightson's depot in Piu Piu. Alarms have gone off, and somebody has seen two people dressed in sort of camo gear and with headlamps breaking into the back of the store and have called police. At this point, police have mobilised, and because they fitted the description of the Phillips family, they obviously mobilised a lot of staff. And then a bit later, probably about half an hour later, the quad bike was spotted on one of the back roads. Oh, sorry, I've just forgotten the name of it right now. And I'm not sure whether they gave chase or they probably didn't. They probably sort of held back a little bit because they knew that there might be firearms. But they've figured out where to lay road spikes, which has been quite ingenious, really, by them. So they've figured out where the quad bike's going to come out on Tianga Road further north, and they've laid road spikes right at that intersection. The quad bike has run over the road spikes and been disabled. It's stopped in a ditch. We've seen the aerial photographs that the Waikato Times took that show the bike in a ditch. Tom's jumped off the bike, got in a high-powered rifle and fired shots at the first police officer on the scene. He's obviously been hit. I believe he suffered eye injuries, unclear whether that's from shrapnel or from a bullet, and he's obviously critically injured and receiving surgery in hospital. The second police unit on the scene, one of the officers opened fire on Tom. I'm not sure if there was an exchange of gunfire or just the police officer opening fire, and Tom has been hit and he's died at the scene. And his body has been left for several hours just lying in the middle of the road. His daughter, we understand, witnessed this whole thing? Well, we believe his daughter, we're thinking Jada, was there and has witnessed it, which is just an horrific outcome, really. It's the outcome that we all feared, that everyone feared that might happen, that he might feel cornered and open fire with firearms that he was known to have, and that's exactly what's happened. And a police officer has been critically injured, which, at least the children are safe, but, a cop's been seriously hurt, and it's not good. It's not good. And still at this stage, we've got two kids who are still in the bush, having no idea of what's gone on. What happened then? Yeah, so I was thinking, oh my God, how long are they going to be in there? Are they going to be able to find them? But it turns out that the child that was at the scene of the shooting has obviously given information to police that's enabled them to walk into their bush camp. Apparently it took quite a while to get there, so it must be way up in the hills. And thankfully there was Maverick and Ember alive and well, and they were able to get them out of there. So that was good. That was great news that came through late on Monday.
I can tell you with great relief this evening that soon after 4:30 today, we've located Tom Phillips' remaining children. They've been found in a campsite not far from here.
That was fantastic news. What's happened to those kids, though? Where are they now?
Don't know. There'll be Oranga Tamariki is obviously heavily involved, so we'll have social workers looking after them. It's unknown whether they've been reunited with any family yet. I would suspect that the grandparents at least would probably be able to see them. I'm not sure whether their mother will be. She'll be hanging out to see them, as you can imagine. But I'm not sure if they were taken to hospital. They probably would have had medical attention, I would say, just to make sure they were okay. But yeah, I'm not sure where they are now.
Why Oranga Tamariki? Is that because of the custody issue potentially, or instead of just going straight to the grandparents?
Well, no, Oranga Tamariki the state had custody of them anyway. this whole time, for the last couple of years. So they were in custody of the state anyway, so it was always going to be that way.
You spoke to the parents yesterday, to Neville. How did he find out what happened and how did he react? Because this is his son at the end of the day.
Yeah, I felt bad approaching him. Obviously, on the day that his son had died, he was working on the farm with his other son, Ben. They were loading supplies onto a quad bike and drove off down the road to another part of their farm. We spoke briefly. He was pretty angry. Came up to the window of my car and was telling me to get away and stuff, and said, imagine how we're feeling. I said, look, I'm real sorry. Just sorry to have to do this, and I'm sorry for what you've been through. And he just said, you don't know what it's like to be shafted several times by the police. Not exactly sure what he meant by that, but, he's obviously got anger towards the police and media, which totally understandable. They've been at the centre of this maelstrom of media attention over 4 years.
And what about the police response and the way that they've dealt with this case over the last 4 years and how they dealt with it yesterday? What's your take on that, Tony?
Well, my personal opinion is that they've been in an absolute terrible position, between a rock and a hard place. Everyone's saying, why can't you go in and find them? They knew from pretty early on that Tom had access to firearms and that there were children involved. How on earth are you supposed to, go, we've seen what can happen, I don't know. I think they probably handled it as well as they could in the circumstances. Just a really, really tricky situation for them.
This story has made worldwide headlines. International media outlets were breaking into their news yesterday.
A New Zealand fugitive has been shot and killed by police after being on the run with his children since 2021.
Police say they fired back when the man, Tom Phillips, shot an officer.
Why do you think this case has gripped not only New Zealand but the world for so long?
Yeah, well, I've been getting calls from media outlets and podcasts all around the world, and I just did one last week, actually, with an Irish podcast, and that was after the break-in at the Superette in Pew Pew. Initially, it was a story of a man against nature or with his children and evading authorities in the wilderness for so long, and captures people's imagination, doesn't it? I think what we're starting to see now, though, is that the guy's probably mentally unstable, and, there's certainly no folk hero element to it, in my opinion. The guy was a terrible father at the end of the day. You can't endorse any of this. It's horrific stuff.
Yet I am reading, particularly on social media, that this guy is a hero and that we don't understand. What do you say to that?
Those people are just keyboard warrior idiots. They don't know what they're talking about at all. There's a lot of that sentiment around. They don't know the full facts. If they did, they'd probably be horrified. You've just got to ignore that. At the end of the day, it was terrible parenting.
It's brutal, but Tom Phillips brought this whole thing on himself. Yes, he was killed, and that is a very hard and sad fact that his kids are going to have to live with for the rest of their lives. Their dad is dead. But he shot a cop, an innocent local constable who was just trying to do his job. The kids were essentially used as helpers, as Dad carried out bank robberies, burglaries, break-ins. These are not the actions of a father who wants the best for his kid.
I can tell you he is no hero. No one who does this to children, no one who unleashes high-powered rifles on my staff is a hero. Simple as that.
Now, you are in the region, you've been there, stayed overnight there, you've been there many times, you're back there today. What's the feel like on the ground? How are locals reacting?
I got to Maricopa yesterday. It's actually been cordoned off, but I found a back road, pretty much just a goat track. Took about an hour and a half to get there, chasing goats off the road. So we got in there, and the locals were all trapped because they couldn't get out. All the roads had been blocked off. And they were just feeling sad, really, just that it had come to this, that a police officer was critically injured and Tom was dead. Nobody wanted that outcome, of course. So they were all feeling quite flat and deflated and sad, they told me, that it hadn't ended safely.
What happens now, Tony? What's from today moving forward? What happens with the case, with the kids, with the families?
Yeah, well, I believe the police are going to be examining this bush camp that they were in to see if there's any clues or information that might help them understand how the family was living and stuff like that. It'll be interesting to see if they try and make any inquiries into who might have been helping Tom. They've sort of said most of the time they're not interested in that. They just want the children to be returned safely. So it's unclear whether there'll be any repercussions for anyone who may have helped him. And the children obviously will be reintegrated into society with the help of experts, social workers and psychologists, and it will be a long road for them, obviously. But for the wider family and the mother of the children, they've finally got their children back.
It's an incredible end, tragic end to the story. The likelihood of someone else being involved. Tony, what's your gut on that?
Yeah, I think, I do know of some people that were helping Tom in the early stages. I sort of tried to chase them down at one point. But I think in more recent times that support has fallen away. I think it's fair to say that in the first couple of years he had support, but I think more recently it's fallen away a bit because people just realise this is getting ridiculous. It's gone on too long. And I think he was getting desperate, I think he was coming out of the bush to do these robberies, and that sort of speaks of a little bit of desperation. So I think support in the early days perhaps, but not so much more recently.
Since I talked to Tony, police have said that they are looking into who might have helped Tom Phillips and how he came to have such a large stockpile of weapons. Here's Police Commissioner Richard Chambers in a press conference yesterday afternoon.
From this point on, we have obviously a police investigation into the circumstances of the incident yesterday morning. We have another investigation that will help put the puzzle together that tells us more about the last 4 years. And in particular, anybody who may have been helping Mr. Phillips, and we will deal with them accordingly.
As a journo, how would you best sum up this story, Tony?
It's just, I've been a journalist for 35 years, and this is one of the most memorable, unique stories that I've ever covered. It has so many different elements to it, with the wilderness and children out in the wild with their father, crimes being committed, bank robberies, shots being fired, money blowing down the street, the works. It's got it all, hasn't it? You can see the movie or the documentary.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Tony Wall. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Phil Benge. I'm Amanda Gillies. Matua.